Tonight we're just doing hopefully it'll be a short presentation on NOSSA's Orchid Code of Ethics. Now, we've put these two documents together. We've actually had a lot of this stuff in the past. It's been inside the Constitution, and a lot of it is actually common sense. But in today's climate, we've realised you do have to have things written down, and there's a lot of people that will do things without realising that the things they're doing are not very helpful as far as the orchid conservation is concerned. So we've created a group of us. It wasn't a one-person thing, created this document, and yeah. So the first document is Code of Ethics Sensitive Sites. Now, this is a fairly big issue in that over the years, our orchids have gradually been becoming more and more threatened, and we're losing a lot of them. So we really do need to look at how we're going to manage them. So we had a subcommittee, and this is what they produced. It is 2 pages. You can print this off from the website. If you go to the welcome page, it's on there'll be a link so that you can find it, and you can print it off as a 2-page document or a 3-page document. I don't want to go through the whole of this document, but I will highlight a couple of points in it. So the first thing I'd just like to briefly point out is that as an organisation, NOSSA is a custodian of the orchids, so we have a responsibility. Our responsibility is about learning to understand the orchids, their growth, etc. It's also about enhancing their ability to survive and just helping to reduce the threats. So, of course, the next big topic is going to be dealing with threats. Now, most of us are aware of the threats that happen to orchids as far as the big things, you know, the bulldozer that goes through, the people that dig up. But the biggest threat, and that is written in red there, is every single one of us that goes and looks at an orchid. We are actually causing damage, and we can be increasing the risk of losing the orchid. So we need to see that ourselves individually, even when we're doing conservation work, that we could potentially be contributing to the demise of that particular population. So there's a lot more there. The areas where, as an individual, we can cause damage is really along the lines of the soil compaction that can occur, just with your feet. Now, there is an article on the website from a Canadian research which showed that just standing still for 10 minutes once a week for a month, the effects of that were still noticeable 12 months later. And that's one person. So we don't realise that type of effect. So I'd encourage you to look for that article. There's also the other thing about the orchids is close to where the orchid is growing are all the juvenile plants. And they're often the ones that get charm killed, but they're the ones that are the next generation. So there's just some of the reasons and the thinking behind what we need to be considering in the issue of sensitive sites. So orchid recovery is very much dependent upon the seedling surviving. And that's the thing we don't often see. I don't know how many people actually look to see how many seedlings they can see when they're looking at a flowering orchid. I know I don't always do that. The second page is dealing with some best practices, how we can minimise our effects. And one of them is actually choosing not to even visit a site. We will from time to time have field trips to sensitive sites, but that's also, we want to be limiting the numbers that go there. Another area where the threats come in is information sharing. Unfortunately, as people, we have a tendency, if someone says, oh, look, there's such and such here, we all want to go and have a look, because they are lovely. So we've put some suggestions up for people using Facebook that you don't post at the time of flowering, don't give locations, all of those. So there's a lot of detail there. Another thing to be aware of is if you're doing anything with the orchids, generally you've got to have a permit. So You can't do hand pollination. I know there are people that say, oh, let's just pollinate this so we get it. It has to be done under a permit. The same as collecting. You can't pick the flowers or anything like that. So that's what that section is dealing with. Cages and exclosures. They're generally there for a reason, and we really don't want them disturbed. There's a lot of experiments and research being done. So if you see something that is set up, it's set up with a purpose, basically. And so we've got a sentence there. If you have to climb a fence to get in, then maybe you shouldn't be there at all. So they're just some of the things that we've got there. And just a reminder, orchids aren't the only endangered plants. When you're looking at the orchids, you could be treading on something that's even more endangered. So it's just creating that awareness is the whole purpose of this document. Now, Code of Ethics Orchid Photography. This was interesting doing some research. So the Tasmanians have done this beautiful document of 20 pages of ethical nature photography, and I really would encourage you to have a look at that. There is a link in our iNotes. Instead of giving you 20 pages worth, we've narrowed it down to 2 pages, and we've tried to summarise. Much of what's written here is actually already in that lovely document that the Tasmanians did. And the link for that is up the very top of the page in the blue writing there. So I'm only just going to hone in on a couple of things, which is the actual photographing. So some of this is repeated about visiting sites. This applies to all orchids, whether they're sensitive or not. So we'll just look at some aspects of photography. And 2 areas is maintain some distance between yourself and the orchid. In fact, 30 centimetres, because within that 30 centimetres is where you're going to find most of your juvenile plants. You'll still have juvenile plants further out, so you do need to be aware of it. And the other area to think about is avoid lying down on the ground to take photographs. Or if you are going to do that, you do it on a track where there are not the orchids there, or other plants, or rocks, really a bare area. So just to illustrate that, I've got 2 anonymous people here. Those who know my family will recognise them. And I didn't realise they actually were doing the right thing without being told. So there was an instinct. I was glad of the instinct there. But just to illustrate, 30 centimetres is a little bit less than the length of your elbow. So that's a good guide. If your feet are back past where your elbow is, you can get up close to the orchid flower, but not have your feet up close. So you can just see the little red marking. It's actually a Cape tulip, if anyone recognises it, but Robert was out photographing some weeds, but the principle still applies. And again, you can see there with the arrow that there's a good distance, and in this instance, Joe had his feet well spread out, so he created more a circle rather than a linear effect. So that's just a bit of a guide. A statement we put in this document was to consider using long focal length cameras, lenses and digital zoom. You know, in other words, equipment that's going to allow you to take a photograph from a distance. A lot of us, like me, are not actually photographers, so we're dependent upon our phones. And I actually went into office work today and had a look and talked to someone about selfies, because I've never used selfies, but those selfie sticks, you can take them from either side. So they weren't a lot of money. That could be a thing that you can use, so you can hold that down close to the orchid and be a distance away bodily and still take your picture. The other thing, of course, is your camera apps on the phone to have a zoom. Make use of the zoom, and I've been using that a lot more, and you still can get some nice pictures while maintaining that distance. A lot of us have probably got the very simple point and shoot type cameras like this one that I have. I went to look at some orchids on Sunday, and I thought, well, let's try out this distance and see how I go with it. And these pictures that I'm going to now show you are all from the one position. I haven't changed positions, but I just made use of my zoom. So we're going to take a picture of that flower that you can see there with the red circle around it. And here we go. I started to zoom in. I also had some very blurry ones, but I was just trying to get in close and closer. And there's my final picture. I did not have to move from where I was to get in to get a nice picture. And I've got the labellum, I can see what the species is, which is Pterostylus excelsus or Oligocactychilus excelsa. There are other things with cameras that I haven't gone into, but I do know that some of the more modern cameras, and my little one included, you can actually connect your cameras to your phone. So you can put your camera on a little tripod, you can have it sitting down close to the plant, you stand back quite a distance and use your phone to control the camera devices and that type of thing. I've seen a member do it and I think that's really good. So there are things we need to be thinking about because that's going to reduce the impact that we're going to have upon the orchids. So, thank you.